All right then. Hi guys. Hope everyone is doing well and is staying safe at home. So this is workshop number four, which is going to be on pre-competition readiness. It's going to be a three-part bit that's going to happen over the next three Wednesdays. I'll explain a little bit more about that in a second. I'm going to try and keep this as short as I can. There's a task at the end, and when I post the video to Coach Now, you'll obviously be able to watch it. The task will be on there as well. But I'll post this onto YouTube as well, and what you'll be able to do there is you'll be able to use timestamps at the bottom of the video to go to specific parts of what I'm talking about. I am doing this in one take as well, so please bear with me if if I stutter a little bit or if there's anything I miss. Right, so pre-competition readiness. Now we're going to be looking at this very much from a mental readiness perspective. Later on down the line, we will look at it from a physical point of view as well. But this is very much going to be down the mental preparation line. So this is kind of how I'm going to split the next three workshops looking at this particular topic. So today is going to be number one here, if you can see the mouse, is going to be just the basics of pre-competition mental and emotional readiness, which I'll go into in a minute. Next week, we'll go a little bit deeper and we'll focus in on preparing mentally and emotionally and looking at strategies and also looking at systems and processes that we can use and also how we can evaluate those to make sure we can actually collect information on it and we know that we're improving it or it's being useful. And then the third part will be looking at planning and performing race day routines, which a lot of us are normally very used to. We use timelines a lot already, but this will just go with that a little bit deeper in looking at our routines. So moving forward, a couple of important things I want to really emphasize starting out on this. And these are the two key points are, firstly, what is important before we go down this road of planning and looking at race day process and things like that is understanding your personal goals and the purpose of the competitions we're going to. Not all competitions are going to be qualifying meets. Not all competitions are going to be the target meets or the meets that you're going to go to and you want to be performing your absolute best. So things like short course nationals for some of the senior swimmers, regionals and nationals, counties for depending on what age group you're in falls in a different points. But certain competitions you'll go to and you want to develop and practice new skills, whether that's in the pool or whether that's in your preparation. But other competitions like regionals, for example, or nationals, you don't want to go to those practicing new skills still. You want to be going there prepared, ready, and understanding what works for you at that moment in time and what you shouldn't be doing. So going and doing something new at a competition that is at that level, it's not the best of ideas. And the second point is just understanding that it's important to have a process to follow and using evaluation skills, which I'll go to in a second. It's a big part of understanding how effective the methods we're using are. And a lot of what I'm about to talk about is it's going to be very personal and individual. Not everyone does the same things. So it's important to evaluate it regularly. And it's also important to have a process. Otherwise, you just go into a competition or into a preparation mentally anyway, and you go in completely blind. You don't really know what's going on. And if I am to ask you, what are the things that went well there, or are you going to continue with that process? And you say, oh well, no, it didn't work. Well, that might have just been in that one moment it didn't work. It could be something that really works for you in the future, but you just got to evaluate it and tweak it a little bit. So hopefully that makes some sense. So moving forward, this is just a little cycle for continuous development that I just wanted to point out. This is something that I use for my own personal development as a coach on a season basis. There's lots of other models out there as well that people use, but I feel like this is something that is quite simple. It's easy to remember, and it's also really easy to kind of put it into positions throughout a season. So this is from a book called Coaching Better Every Season, which is a favorite of mine. And the whole purpose of the book is talking about getting better every year and adding something new in, keeping things fresh and keep getting better essentially. And this principle is called the 4E's. 4 parts of the process, and I use this from a coaching point of view, like planning a season, for example, but this is also quite relevant here, I think. The first stage is envisioning what you're going to do. So putting your process into place, knowing what strategy you're going to use. The second part there on the right is to enact it. So to do it and to actually practice it and put it into your training or your racing. The third part is to then evaluate what you've done already in the enactment phase. And then part 4 is to enhance it, so to make it better. And then you just go back through the cycle again and keep repeating that tweaking process. So hopefully that makes some sense. Right, so moving into just the next kind of phases of this little presentation. So if we focus in on the idea of preparing mentally and emotionally, what we're going to talk about is some key factors to that. The first part here is this idea of getting in the zone. So getting into the zone, it is a common term that a lot of people throw around, and it is relevant and it makes a lot of sense, the idea of getting into the zone, but I don't think a lot of people really understand what it means or how you can even practice it, or how you measure that idea. So what we're going to do is just look a little bit into that. So this idea of IZOP, which means individual zones of performance, that's what the zone is. It's your individual mental state that is going to help you get the maximum performance out of what you're doing. Whether it's playing a musical instrument, in the pool, in an exam. And that's an important idea here, that this is not just about training and swimming. This is about life, exams, music practice, or the sport practice, whatever it is. This all really comes together under kind of like a universal life thing. And it is a skill. And this is something I'll say a lot. This is a skill that needs to be practiced and tweaked and honed. It's not just something that you will snap your fingers and get right. It will take a lot of practice, and a lot of failure will come with that, and a lot of learning. So there's been kind of 3 key discoveries made about how emotions link into peak performance and kind of relate to this idea of getting in the zone. And the 3 areas are, the first one, the zone is thought of as a range rather than one single point that you have to hit to be in the zone, if that makes sense. And I'll show a little diagram of that in a second. The second one is there is no ideal zone that works for everybody. It is very individual, and some of the bits I'll talk about in a minute will expand on that individuality. And the third part is both pleasant and unpleasant emotions can be very useful. Now, to emphasize a couple of those points there, this little diagram here on the right, it gives 3 athlete examples. And down the bottom here, you can see this little stress and anxiety level going from low through to high. So low stress would be, you're really relaxed, not really worrying about too much. High would be absolute craziness going on in your head and you can't quite control it. So the 3 examples they give, it's very kind of generic into 3 phases, and different people can fall into different areas to this, but this is kind of 3 basic points. So what you see here in athlete A, with a low individual zone of performance, that their zone occurs when they are at their most relaxed. So their anxiety level is quite low. You might see people like this at competitions who, they do their preparation, their warm up, their land work, all of that stuff, but they do it while having a nice chat, and everything's very kind of relaxed, and they're having a bit of fun, but they're still doing all the right things, but it's a lot looser, if that makes sense. You'll get people who are like that, and they're quite regular. Now, if we go to the opposite end of the scale, athlete C here, their zone of performance is in a really high level of anxiety. So there's almost a lot of nervousness there, a little bit of tension involved. And if you look here at this big bar, all of this area here is out of their zone. So people who work here and operate well at this level, if they're too relaxed, their performance is just going to be non-existent. They're not going to be ready whatsoever. They need that level of stress about what they're doing in order for them to get the best performance out of themselves. And then you got in the middle here, which is basically stuck right in the middle, where you get a lot of pleasant emotion, some pleasant emotion that goes into that, but also some unpleasantness that goes into that feeling as well. They might be a little bit relaxed, having a chat, but at the same time inside be a little bit tense and kind of, I'm feeling the nerves here. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of an example of at least three of the kind of getting in the zone states that you can be in, and hopefully it gives a little bit of context to these 3 points. So moving forward, it's looking at relaxation in our mental and emotional preparation. So while it might sound counterintuitive to really focus on relaxation, especially since we've talked about this zone bit here, being relaxed is actually quite important, not in terms of the mental, but, just in terms of the way that we go about things. It might sound counterintuitive, like I say, but relaxation is a key factor to moving well through the water. And I think that's a big emphasis. And this is a bit of a different tangent here. But when it comes to skills and technique and racing, if you swim tense, which is very separate to some of the emotional, mental things that we're talking about here right now, if you swim tense, you're not going to be able to move effectively. It's when you practice, when you train, you don't go up and down the pool in this really tense manner. You are generally quite relaxed, especially the more tired you get, you tend to let things go a little bit more. Now, we want to control that, of course, but when you're in the training environment, you are generally more relaxed. If you go into the pool, in the racing pool, and you start tensing up, that's when movement gets a little bit funny and it's not quite as effective. So when it comes to relaxation, learning how to relax to an effective point when you're in the racing environment is a skill which needs to be developed. And I've already mentioned that this is a skill and it needs practice. Just like the overarching theme of mental preparation and how you implement that needs practice and it needs to be evaluated, just like I showed a couple of slides ago. So this is some of the most popular ways of creating relaxation prior to performance and bringing that into your mental preparation is learning how to use correct breathing technique. So a couple of key points here. Deep breathing techniques allow you to control tension in your body. If you breathe really shallow, and you could try it if you want to right now, you do really shallow breaths, it creates a level of stress, a level of anxiety, a level of tension that you don't want to have when you are preparing or when you are competing. You want to have good control over your body, over your muscle contraction, over the way that your mind is working, and using deep breathing techniques can really help that. Practices like yoga and meditation, which a lot of high-level athletes practice, whether it's either one or the other or both of them together, they use them quite readily, and they use the breathing control as a foundation or a fundamental of doing yoga well and doing yoga properly or doing meditations properly. A lot of meditation is about breathing technique. And it also just generally aids in developing your ability to focus. Taking 2 or 3 deep breaths when you're in a stressful situation will do wonders for your stress levels. It will bring them down. It will recenter you and refocus you back to where you need to be. And that is probably one of the most simple things you'll take away from this. It may sound almost too good to be true, but 3 nice deep breaths often will help you just get yourself centered again, and it will save you a lot of stress if you are stressed. So moving forward, and this is one that we're really going to expand on over the next 2 or 3 weeks as part of this kind of mental preparation process. So the idea of using imagery. So using imagery is the most commonly practiced version of mental preparation. Now, it is worth noting that this is often called visualization. And I just made a note here on the presentation too that, while that is, it is part of it, your visualization it's not a wrong term by any standards, but I feel imagery is a better one. Because what imagery kind of brings into it brings in the use of all of our senses. And I think that's quite important. Now, not all of us will want to use all of our senses when we're doing this. And, some stuff we'll do in a couple of weeks will get you thinking about what works for you individually. But things like, what you see, what you hear, what you might feel or touch, what you might smell, what you might taste, for example, those are all things that come under the imagery banner. That if you just focus on visualization, which is all what you see or what you might see through your eyes, that kind of limits the focus here a little bit. And I think the idea of imagery and bringing all of those senses into it will give you a better outcome from your use of imagery in your preparations, if that makes some sense. And there's kind of an expansion on this use of imagery, and one of the real well-used practices is a process called imagery scripting. Now, essentially what that is, it's creating like a narrative for yourself that you follow with, and this could be in any situation. I mean, one of the examples I've given to athletes in the last couple of days was what I feel like I would do would be to prepare a little narrative that was maybe 60 seconds or 2 minutes long if you were reading it. Prepare a narrative about what your pre-race is going to look like. What are the things you're going to see, feel, and hear behind the blocks, your competitors getting ready, the sound of the water, the whistle that goes before you get on the block, and kind of, you get in the water, you describe what that first 50 meters is going to feel like, what your turns are going to be like. You're kind of being very clear about your descriptions as you go through it, what it feels like, what it sounds like, what it looks like. And you put that together and then almost make an audio recording. Now, my personal method would be to do an audio recording and then sit there and listen to it. And we'll go into a kind of an expansion of that in a minute when we talk about the use of music as well, which could be something interesting to consider and think about. But using imagery scripts allows us to reiterate desired behaviors and emotions prior to racing. Now, where this is important is that this starts bringing this all into having a systemized or a proper process in place for using imagery, for using music, which we'll talk about in a second, and for using relaxation techniques and things like that. It makes it a proper process and not just something that we do randomly. And some of us will do that randomly on our own. We all have visions or images in our mind of what we would like things to do, but we don't necessarily know what we're doing or even why we're doing it. It just kind of happens. So this is starting to go into the territory now of how do you practice that? How do you plan for the process, which we'll then expand on in the next couple of weeks. So there are two key perspectives when you do look at creating a imagery script to use before in your preparation. And those are pretty simple. Working in first person, so coming at it from a point of view of what you are actually seeing when you talk about that script. From a third person's perspective, so almost imagining that someone is watching you do it and they're describing it. But the most advanced athletes and people who are really skilled at using their mental skills and their emotional skills are able to move in and out of both, not all the time, but when it's necessary, when it feels right to them, to maximize their use of imagery in their mental and emotional preparations. So moving on to probably one of the more popular ways to mentally prepare yourself, and that's using music. So playing music during preparation, it's definitely a commonplace practice in a lot of sports. Whether that's playing it on big speakers in the training environment, or whether that's using headphones before races. You see a lot of the elite level athletes, doing that before they race, and it is a very good thing to do. But a couple of key points here is that, imagery, the use of imagery also seems to have a strong influence on performance when you combine that with music. And it is obviously worth noting that using music is not for everybody. It's not the kind of thing where you should watch this or read this and think, oh my God, I've got to use music, or I've got to go and write this script and I've got to visualize it. Don't rush into these things. These things need to be practiced and they need to be considered. Now, using music, when you use music prior to performances, it's important that as an athlete, you select music that you have an emotional connection with. Not something that maybe your friend listens to that they go, oh, well, this is a really good pump up song. It's not about necessarily pumping yourself up to the state of craziness. It's about finding your zone and using that to get into your ideal space mentally. So make sure that you have a connection to that is very important. Whether it's the artist, whether it's the song, whether it's the feel of the song, it makes a lot of difference. So the key point there is the type of music that you select needs to be considered looking at the range of your individual zone of performance. So if we flick back real quick, if I find it, to this little scale here, again, if we need this high level of stress, there might be a certain type of music or certain rhythm or beat that you may need to have to help you elicit that stressful response. Whereas on the other end, there might be a level of mellowness, I guess, to the music that you would need to allow you to maintain that relaxation. And the same in the middle, there might need to be a balance there. So understanding what your personal zone is important when looking at what music or what song you are looking at. When do you play it? and understanding, I think, most importantly, why is it actually being used? Are you just listening to music because others do? Because that's not the best way to go about things. So that's the last one on there. So moving forward, so just this is some overarching key messages to looking at developing mental and emotional skills. So again, I've said this already, just like other aspects of performance, mental and emotional skills must be regularly practiced. And there's a few key points here that are really a big part of this. So we got to develop the use of this during appropriate competitions, not at the big major meet suddenly start doing something different, because that will throw us off. We've got to practice it at the right times. We then need to link it to the training environment. We need to be able to go into certain training sessions and training sets and practice our visualization technique, our use of music, getting in the right zone, our relaxation, all of those areas, and we can do that differently. And on the next point there, I have kind of expanded on that practice in the training environment and in the competition environment, that we need to develop this progressively for different age groups. So age group athletes, you're always looking at broader fundamental skills. We aren't looking at necessarily the detail of what is the song or what is the script that you're using or what is this, what is that. It's about learning and understanding the technique and then slowly bringing new elements in there that we expand on as we get older to the senior level, where you then start hit that point where what is your specific strategy for using mental preparation? Is it a specific song combined with a script that you listen to? There are plenty of ways to have a song playing in your headphones and then record over the top of that, you going through your script as an example. And that's how we get specific with that. So, and then obviously with the fourth point, and bringing it back to the beginning of this presentation, that we need to be regularly evaluating and using a planned approach, which we can measure. And I've just put a little in brackets there, not just what, I don't know how I've, oh no, I do understand that. What I'm talking about, not just what sticks. So basically the phrase is, don't just throw things at the wall and see what sticks. Have a plan, evaluate it and measure it, and be mindful about what you're actually doing and be purposeful about it. Mental preparation is just one part of a performance puzzle. So you always need to balance practice with this. You don't go away from watching something like this or having this push towards you and go, oh my God, mental preparation is everything. It is a part of it. Just like physical preparation, and this is what the next quote is here at the bottom, when it comes to physical preparation and training, all of the hard hours of training practice may be wasted if all aspects of performance are not considered and developed in balance. So psychological development or mental and emotional skills, that is one piece of a big puzzle. So it's important not to go too far down one road and ignore everything else. We've always got to maintain quality balance across everything that we're trying to work on. So hopefully that makes some sense, and hopefully that gives you a little bit of information. Like I said, on the video, on YouTube in particular, I'll have timestamps for that. Let me just quickly run through the task for this week. So this week's task is in 3 smaller parts, which I'd like to be presented in an audio file or a video file, which is then going to be sent over into your Coach Now personal space. I'd like to try and keep it to a maximum of 2 minutes if that's possible. I wish I could keep it to a maximum of 2 minutes on these videos, but I do like to ramble. So if we can follow that process, that'd be spot on. So the tasks are, part 1, what I want you to do is reflect on your best and your worst performance in your career so far, and think about how was your preparation or performance different in these 2 events. And what I mean by that is, you look at your best performance or what you see as your worst performance. Was there anything that you did differently? Were you more relaxed before the best performance and more tense before the worst performance? Something as simple as that. Did you listen to music before your best performance and didn't listen to it before your worst performance? Or was it a different song? Those are just a couple of examples, but something for you to consider. The second point there, I want you to go back to that zone slide and look at that little diagram, those 3 examples, and just consider which athlete you feel you most closely resemble on those 3 really simplistic scales, if that makes sense. And then the third part of that is just considering and reflecting on are there any of these practices that I've talked about today that you already used? And has this workshop, or has what you've read so far today, given you any ideas how to use them in a different way, or maybe even use them in a better way? So if you can take those three, put them into a quick little 2-minute audio or video recording, pop it in your Coach Now space, and then we'll have a quick discussion about it in the comment section. And hopefully this gets you thinking. Thank you very much for listening, guys. And I look forward to sending you the week 5 presentation, which will take a further dive into mental preparation. Thank you.